The majority of members of the parliament voted against adopting the deadening Section 89 Phala Phala report. The adoption would have led to MPs pushing for the establishment of a committee to proceed with the removal of State President Cyril Ramaphosa from office. The three-member independent panel had come to a conclusion that the president may have flouted the constitution and his oath of office. We unpack now proceedings that took place earlier on in the Cape Town City Hall with the following experts. We have Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, who is joining us, as well as Dr Ntsikelelo, breakfast. Dr Koma possibly will also be joining us as this conversation continues. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight up here on In Focus. By the way, question for you tonight on 072-110-558. For defiance by senior ANC members of the party line, is this a sign of organizational ill discipline or an act that should be commended as those MPs exercised their democratic right to hold the executive accountable? Gentlemen, let's start right there. I mean, first and foremost, defiance by senior party members in the ANC. Dr. Breakfast, is this something unheard of? Is this new? Is this a sign that organizational ill discipline is starting to take root within the ANC in a manner that has not been seen before?
Thabo, just to set the scene for your viewers, my view is that the ANC as a disciplined force of the left subscribes to what I call the Marxist and Leninist organizational model, meaning that when a decision has been made at the highest decision-making body, all and sundry has to abide by that. Let me qualify that. But that doesn't mean that decisions must be made willy-nilly without a thorough debate. So after you have lost a debate, then you have to abide by orders. That is called democratic centralism. But it's democracy and centralism, not the imposition of decisions without a debate. So in this regard, I think there was a debate. A particular faction won, a particular faction lost, and that order was communicated to all and sundry. So those, in my opinion, who did not vote according to the order, they do constitute ill discipline. And I think there might be some action that could be taken against them. But at the same time, we are in the build-up to the conference of the ANC, and it's common knowledge that there is a fight that has broken out between the two factions, namely Radical Economic Transformation and the CR22 faction. So I think at the moment, in my view, you have the soft-liners and the hardliners. So the hardliners are those ones who are part of Radical Economic Transformation, who are going on the offensive and who thought that, in my view, they were going to use the findings by Section 89 as a nail in the coffin, against the president. On the other hand, you have the soft-liners who believe that, the president is experiencing a political onslaught, who are going on the defensive.
Professor Mngomezulu, the overall political picture that is beginning to emerge, particularly when we look at those who voted yes for the going ahead of this impeachment committee. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Supra Mahumapilu, Msebenzi Zwane, Mervyn Dirks. There is a question mark on whether or not Thandi Mahambeshala was deliberate in her action or whether she made a mistake. At this particular point, that vote counts. Is this an attack on the ANC, or is this an attack on President Cyril Ramaphosa?
No, thank you very much for the question, Thabo. And I'll pick up from where my colleague left off. This notion of democratic centralism is understood exactly in the manner he described it. Normally what happens is you have these internal discussions within the organization using its own structures. In this case, you had the National Working Committee meeting, deliberating on the issue, and then making a recommendation to the special NEC. The NEC meeting said, and then it also came up to with the conclusion that they were going to instruct Phemima Jordina in her capacity as the chief whip to then inform members of parliament as to how they were going to vote. That is, those who belong to the ANC. So in the context of democratic centralism, then of course everybody was expected to toe the line, as it were, and then vote as a bloc, as was expected by the NEC. But then of course the NEC itself has done has made a number of blunders, including the issue of the Phala Phala matter, which has become a big issue, which is in fact the reason why there was this debate today. Ordinarily, the NEC is supposed to be the deciding voice between conferences in as far as the ANC constitution is concerned. But then what the NEC did in terms of the Phala Phala report from the Integrity Commission, it sent it to the meeting that is happening over the weekend. This is the ANC elective conference. For some, this might amount to dereliction of duty, because they had the responsibility to take a decision on the matter, they didn't. Of course, some will argue that the issue is sub judice, meaning that it's still in front of the legal structures of the country, and they should be allowed to do their job, and so on and so forth. So it will go on like that. But the reality of the matter is, you are also dealing with a situation whereby Parliament is responding to the Constitutional Court judgment on the Nkandla matter, whereby the Constitutional Court made a ruling that members of Parliament have a responsibility to hold the executive to account.
Yeah.
So now the balancing line is a problem here.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you want to be subjected to the party rules and then vote as a bloc. On the other hand, you want to respond to the Constitutional Court judgment and make sure that you hold the executive accountable. Yeah. So that is where I think the problem was. So the 5 members that voted differently from their fellow colleagues might argue, in fact, when they are called to explain by their party structures, they might argue that the reason why we did what we did was because we were responding to the constitutional judgment, and therefore there is nothing untoward that we've done. Yeah. But we'll wait and see how the ANC is going to handle this matter.
Will this require an adjustment, Dr. Breakfast, to this particular rule? Rule 25 of the ANC 17.3, saying failing and refusing or neglecting to execute or comply with any ANC policy, standing order, rule, regulation or resolution adopted or made in terms of the Constitution amounts to organizational misconduct. So you've got that on the one hand, and you've got the Constitutional Court saying central to the freedom to follow the dictates of personal conscience in the oath of office, members are required to swear or affirm faithfulness to the Republic and obedience to the Constitution and laws. Nowhere does the Supreme Law provide for them to swear allegiance to their political parties. So you've got these two standing orders, so to speak. Which one, as an MP, do you adhere to?
It's a chicken and egg debate, Thabo. I think for me the challenge is that some people tend to apply double standards. When it suits them, they talk about party discipline. When it doesn't suit them, they talk about voting with their conscience. I can bet my bottom dollar all the people who voted in favor of the report during the time of Jacob Zuma, they voted against the motion of a confidence. But this time around, because it's a different ball game, they voted the exact opposite. So you can see that people are applying a double standard, meaning that some people are not truthful in terms of their posture. I do agree with the Prof that there is a gray area here, because on the one hand, you have separation of powers in terms of checks and balances, that the legislative institution has to hold the executive institution accountable. And that was one of the rulings that was made by the Constitutional Court in 2016, when the EFF alongside the DA took Parliament to court to say that they failed to demand accountability from the executive. So yes, I do agree with Prof that we have to strike that balance, or striking the balance is a bit of a challenge.
And does this mean, I mean, just like amendments that have been done over and over again as far as the situation with the step-aside rule, that the ANC might need to, at this conference, have a look at that intersection between this Rule 25 and what the Constitutional Court had said on that matter? It's known as the secret ballot case, but of course it was speaking more a lot around the Nkandla matter. Professor Mngomezulu?
No, you are making a valid point there. Honestly, a number of sections in the ANC's constitution can be subjected to law. We have seen this happening with the so-called step-aside resolution. The ANC, in fact, considered that there might be a legal element with that section specifically. That is why after the resolution had already been adopted, the ANC's leadership deemed it necessary to invite legal experts to give an opinion as to whether that particular resolution is in contravention of the Constitution. Because the Constitution is the supreme law of the country. It doesn't matter which church you belong to, which political party you belong to. The reality of the matter is whatever constitution you come up with at your level must not be in contravention of the Constitution of the country. So this example with the step-aside resolution is just one case. Then there is this one. Remember that when the ANC's constitution was crafted, it was before the Constitutional Court ruling. So therefore, with benefit of hindsight, you may say that at the time when the ANC put together its constitution, there was nothing wrong in the clauses that it came up with. But now you have a Constitutional Court judgment which is used as a source of reference whenever you revise your constitutions, and therefore it will be important for the ANC to then have a relook at each and every section in its constitution and then establish the extent to which it is in line with or in contravention with the constitution of the country. Failure to do so might then expose the organization going forward, because you will have people citing this particular judgment by the Constitutional Court and say, I've been charged using Section X of the Constitution of the ANC, but that Constitution itself, or that clause itself, is in contravention of the Constitution. Then we'll have a number of legal battles being fought, which is unnecessary. So it's imperative then that the ANC has to have a relook at all of these sections and make sure that it protects itself than wait for the time when its own members will take it to court, and then they'll come back and say, the moment you take the ANC to court, you then deem yourself a delinquent, so to speak, and then you must be chucked out of the ANC, like they've been doing recently, that if you don't toe the line, then of course we have violated the Constitution in its current form.
072-110-558-4. Let's hear your thoughts. Defiant senior members of the party today voting for going ahead with the setting up of the impeachment committee that will look into the removal of the president from office. Is this the members exercising their democratic right to hold the executive accountable, or is this organizational ill discipline? What are your thoughts? Still with us, political analyst Professor Bheki, Mngomezulu, and Dr. Ntsikelelo. Breakfast will be joined by governance expert in a moment, Dr. Sam Koma as well. Stay with us. In Focus continues shortly. Yeah, Dr. Sam Koma is now coming in to the conversation. Dr. Koma, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you for your time. Is there a contestation, or even, what would you say, a butting of heads when it comes to governance requirements and what the party order says as far as how you must vote, especially on this particular matter? There are those who are looking at this and say, well, you know, in terms of governance and in terms of holding the executive accountable, we should be able to exercise our democratic right. The party saying, well, once there is a standing order from the party, the rules say if you behave contrary, you are actually subjecting yourself to a disciplinary because it's considered misconduct.
Oh yeah, thanks, Tabo, for the opportunity. In fact, since 1994, the ANC in Parliament has consistently kept the party line in terms of debating and also voting on any motion that is tabled before Parliament, especially if it's a motion coming from the opposition parties. So there's been a precedent set already that any MP coming out of the ranks of the ANC who defies the party line has to face consequences. And we've seen previously what happened to the former ANC MP, Dr. Makosi Khoza. We have also seen what is happening in most of the municipalities where councillors of the ANC, if they vote with the opposition, they do face consequences, which also entail drastic consequences such as expulsion. So we are likely to see some consequences that may be meted out against ANC MPs who defied the party line today in terms of dealing with the expert panel report, because the NEC of the ANC has already resolved that this particular expert panel should not be adopted come the parliamentary debate and also voting that took place today. So, but I think there's been some political calculation on the part of some of the MPs. Remember, the ANC will be holding its conference, which start on Friday.
Yeah.
So some, they still have or harbor presidential ambitions. They may have calculated that come Friday, maybe my name may be, I may be nominated from the floor because I've shown some courage and also bravery in terms of defying the party line. But I don't see this particular, individual succeeding if that has been a political calculation. So it's more political expediency on the part of some of the ANC MPs.
Yeah. Dr. Breakfast, I mean, precisely that political calculation. Let's talk about the political picture that's emerging for those who decided to be absent. Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who is, of course, going for the position of president this weekend. Lindiwe Sisulu as well. Others say she was there earlier on, but then when time to vote came, she was not present. Does this put them in a stronger position? Do they become stronger contenders who decided, look, I'm going to stay out of this matter, which is an individual matter. The president has got to do with Cyril Ramaphosa, and I shouldn't be caught up in this and muddy myself. I will just stay out of it.
I think, Thabo, those people were stuck between the rock and the hard place. I think the writing was on the wall that those who wanted ANC members to vote in favor of the report were going to lose, and they knew that in advance. On the other hand, I think the challenge that they had was to join forces with opposition parties, because that does constitute a discipline. No wonder they stayed away from Parliament. But I know that Dr. Mkhize did break ranks to say that there was no thorough debate surrounding how ANC members should vote, that people who were arguing the exact opposite of the dominant view were not allowed to speak enough at the meeting that made the call how ANC members should vote.
Professor Mngomezulu was raising a matter that Dr. Breakfast earlier on, which you have weighed in on a little bit, I saw in some report. He calls it NEC blunders. You question the timing of certain actions that have been taken of late. One of them being to kick down the can the report from the Discipline or Integrity Commission, I beg your pardon, and the timing of the expulsion of the likes of Carl Niehaus and the suspension or barring of particular leaders from participating in the NEC. When you look at that and the fact that it's leaning more towards those who are in opposition to President Cyril Ramaphosa, does it say that he is orchestrating all this?
Of course, I think it does say that. In the bigger scheme of things is the upcoming conference of the ANC, which is just around the corner. And Ramaphosa has been accused of being too soft on his political detractors. So I think those who are close to him have managed to untwist him to say that he needs to take a swipe at those who are opposing him in public. I think the suspension of Kalne House is very symbolic. The timing of it, the decision that was made over the weekend to prevent Tonyengeni and Batabile Dlamini is also very symbolic. There's a subtext to those political developments, because those decisions were made just before today's meeting in Parliament. So that was some kind of a psychological warfare. They were trying to convey a message even to those who wanted to vote against party orders that they were going to be dealt with. I think suspending Kalne House was very unnecessary. I know that is very critical of the president, but in my opinion, it doesn't pose any threat to the Ramaphosa faction because the RNT forces, their numbers, they've shrunk. And I think, in my opinion, that the Ramaphosa faction is going to win the upcoming conference. So why then do you sideline them? Why do you suspend them? By sidelining them, you are actually playing into their hands that you are on a political mission, patching people that do not agree with you. And by so doing, you are going to escalate the magnitude of the conflict within the party. So that, I think, it poses a threat to the stability of the ANC. And some people might want to fight back, maybe by, collapsing the conference, or maybe by engaging in other operations of attacks.
Yeah. Professor Mngomezulu, does Dr. Zweli Mkhize come out a stronger contender following, of course, the outcomes of today and him being absent in that particular vote?
No, thank you very much for that question, Thabo. I'll answer your question, and then there is another point I want to pick up from Dr. Breakfast, which is a very critical one. In fact, at face value, it might appear as though Dr. Zweli Mkhize's absence might work to his advantage. But a counter view will be that he should have been there and then do what the other 5 members did and then voice his opinion openly. Of course, some might say that the moment you do that, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage. So looking at things from that vantage point, then you might say his calculations were right, that let me rather stay away. That is, of course, on the assumption that he deliberately stayed away. We don't know for sure. There might have been genuine reasons as to why he was not there. Why, for example, Bongani Pongo was not there, and then why Lindiwe Sisulu exited the stage just before the voting took place. So there are a number of reasons. Right now, we may be speculating, but only them know why they were not there when voting took place. But then, of course, the other point is that by virtue of the fact that we have 2 contenders for the presidency, does not really mean that these are the only contenders. There is a point Dr. Breakfast made earlier on that there is still a possibility of names being suggested or being proposed from the floor, which in fact comes to the point that I made at another place when I was talking to my friends, saying that those who are thinking that it's over with Titi Mabuza, they will have to think twice. Because the reason why Titi Mabuza is quiet is not because he has given up. He's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and you may have a shock of your life when the conference happens over the weekend.
He voted no today. He voted for
yes, indeed.
the adoption of this. Smiling while doing so. But what was also quite interesting is Phumulo Masualle as well voting no, him having been quite vocal about President Cyril Ramaphosa stepping down. How do you read that political tactic?
No, I think if you read that particular activity in context, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. Because if the NWC and the NEC take a position, and then you have the likes of Gwede Mantashe telling you upfront that anyone who will vote differently from the party's position, that person will have to face the music. And you are vying for a position, and you know that for you to get that position, you need the support of your own members. Definitely, you have to do your own calculations. Even if you did math lead, you will do your calculations and then say that this is the best approach under the circumstances. So I do understand what they did, although I know for sure that they basically voted against their conscience.
Yeah.
Given a chance, they would have voted differently, but to toe the party line, then they had to vote in the manner they did.
Dr. Koma?
The last thing...
Yeah. Last thing, yes. Give us the last thing.
Yes, I was going to say the last thing I want to say on this matter is that The ANC at the moment is to borrow Dr. Breakfast's word, is caught between the rock and the hard place. On the one hand, we have the president of the ANC assuming the presidency and then making so many promises. And then, of course, when it came to deliver it, it was a different ball game altogether. One of them was that it was going to rebuild the party. Now, the incidences that we've just cited, chasing Kalni House at the 11th hour, putting out some of the potential contenders, then you ask yourself the question, is that in line with the rebuilding the party? I'm not too sure, especially on the eve of an elective conference. I'm not sure that is the case. Yeah. So there are a number of things that we could follow up and then arrive at different conclusions than the ones that the ANC leadership has arrived at. And in fact, the ANC membership has also arrived at.
Dr. Koma, while we are on that, on the question of rebuilding, does the impact of this serve to unify the ANC more as it goes to conference, or will we be seeing a more divided ANC going into this conference?
Yeah, of course, there will be reactions, there will be tensions and also disagreements, but it is now evident that the faction that has an upper hand is the one that is aligned to President Ramaphosa. So going into this conference, they have a stronger base in terms of emerging victorious, but I don't think he will get the individuals that he's hoping to lead as a collective in the top 6. So he's likely to have other candidates coming from other factions who are also elected into the top 6. So you may have a repeat of the 2017 Nasrec conference, where he does not have influence as to who becomes his deputy president and also who becomes his SG, and also by extension the rest of the other top 6 positions. And also it may also influence how the NEC gets constituted. It may also have a reflection of a mixed bag in terms of the final outcome.
Dr. Sam Koma, Professor Mngomezulu, and Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and helping us in this conversation tonight.